guys are watching the greatest
spaghetti YouTube spaghetti
downward spiral.
Can you save me? Or will you fail me now?
Welcome back to the worst channel on all of YouTube. I'm Dreams420. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Figuarts Super Saiyan Vegeta Awakened Super Saiyan Blood. This guy came out alongside the Boy from the Future Trunks in April 2023 at a retail price of $35. And as is the case for most of these figures at that kind of a price point, he was a standard over-the-counter release. And much like with Trunks and the Monkey, I'm going to preface that this was in fact the first version of Vegeta, at least I think it was. So any issues that this particular copy may have, yours probably won't, assuming Tamashii fixes any QC issues in later batches. And fortunately, there really isn't much to say on that front. Just a couple typical Tamashii W's with 2.0 Vegetas. But I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here, so let's start this one off with the box. Taking a look at Vegeta's box, you have a picture of him on the front, a clear window that shows him and a couple of his accessories, his name, the farce we call Tamashii Nation's quality seal, Bandai Tamashii Nation's Dragon Ball Z logos, all that shit, designed by Tamashii Nations in Japan, Bandai Spirits made in China. On the side you have his name on the window and his name on the cardboard. On the bottom you have Vegeta Awakened Super Saiyan Blood, as well as a picture of his face. On the other side you have his foot, his face, and his hand. On the top you have his face and a little bit more of the window. On the back you have product shots of Vegeta, and like father like son, or in this case like son like father, none of these pictures are colored correctly. I have no idea why Tamashii are adding a green tinge to these photos now, but they are, and it irritates the shit out of me. Also have the Bandai Namco distribution sticker. And with that, we can wrap this section of the video up and get Vegeta out of his box.
You need to stop everything. What are you doing with your life? Look at you, sitting in front of a computer with Cheetos crumbs all over your fucking shirt.
You should kill yourself.
Much like what I did with the Infinite Latent Power Trunks, I'm just gonna run through the only comparison that I think is actually worth your time. So here Vegeta is standing next to his original counterpart. And once again, like father, like son, differences here are very, very obvious. The original Vegeta has a much more saturated hair color, where the new one has a more desaturated platinum blonde look with a metallic finish. The old Vegeta also has much duller colors, where the new one has much more vibrant, much more saturated colors all throughout his body. And then one more difference, since I'm not going to be able to show the original Vegeta's faces, since his head in this shot is actively being held on with modeling clay, the face prints on the new Vegeta are vastly superior to the original. His eyes are looking in one consistent direction, whereas the old Vegeta had the issue where his eyes would be looking off in two different directions. His face now has some thin line art on it. It's not too thick like the original Super Saiyan Goku was. It's just thick enough to where you'll notice it. And then I think the skin tone is a little bit paler on the new Vegeta, but I could be mistaken. So with that out of the way, let's move into Vegeta's aesthetics. Taking a look at Vegeta's aesthetics, sculpt is pretty much par for the course for what you'd expect out of a 2.0 Vegeta, as it's literally just Super Vegeta all over again, so there's no point in talking about that front. Paint job, on the other hand, I think the colors are really good, but it can be a little iffy in spots. You can see where the brown doesn't quite line up with his armor, area where the paint sort of scratched or wasn't fully applied, something like that. And then, as is par for the course with Tamashii post 2017, this guy has zero shading anywhere aside from his hair. He does have a little bit of orange lowlights in his hair and nothing on the back. It's a shame that it's only on the front. I think it looks pretty decent, all things considered, but it's definitely irritating that Tamashii haven't applied it all throughout, because it looks good, other than the fact I think it could have been just a little more subtle, but there's not much else to say on that front. The only areas where there are a glossy finish would be areas like his joints, or this area right here, which we'll touch on when we get to the articulation. So overall, I would say this guy looks really, really good for the price point he's coming out at. Definitely not perfect, but not bad either, as the rest of the figure is basically just the recycled remains of Super Vegeta. The same can be said for his accessories. Vegeta's got a smirking face looking down to his right, a yelling face that looks forward, a pair of folded arms that are a little bit sloppy around the edges, but far from unpresentable, a pair of open palm blasting, grabbing, and martial arts stance hands, as well as a pointing to himself hand, perfect for scenes where he's just about to get his ass beat. The faces are good. They have the same sort of orange shading at the base of his hair that the rest of his head sculpt has. The only issue that I have with them is the fact that his smirking face isn't looking forward. It's annoying that Tamashii are giving us only one face that's looking in a very specific direction to recreate a specific pose. I think it would be much nicer if we just got the one face that's looking forward to be able to recreate more poses with Vegeta, as opposed to just having the one where he's looking off to the side, and what you can do with it is significantly more limited. But overall, I'd say Vegeta has a solid array of accessories for the price point he's coming out at. Doubly so considering the fact the original figure he's based on was about $50 at retail. And for $15 to $20 off the original Vegeta's price, I'd say this is a pretty good deal. So with all that out of the way, let's wrap this one up with Vegeta's articulation. To quickly run through Vegeta's articulation, his head is on a ball hinge that allows him to look up that far, down that far, side to side, no problem. A little bit of tilt at his neck. Full 360 out of his shoulder. Go up about that far and can cross his chest about that far. As I mentioned earlier, mine has a bit of a glossy sheen to his shoulder. That's because I was a retard while applying shock oil to mine, and the reason I had to apply shock oil to mine is because the ball joint in his shoulder was literally so tight that it felt like it was going to shear off at the peg when I first got him. As you just saw, it's moving just fine now, so no issues there. Full 360 out of his bicep swivel, double joint at the elbow, wrist pivot, and swivel. His torso can lean that far forward, that far back, a little bit of side to side, but nothing too crazy. Can rotate a little bit at his chest, but most of your rotation is going to be coming out of the waist, and it is a little tight on mine. His legs are where this mold really starts to show its age. It can only go that far front to back, it can only split that far side to side, and they have the wonderful 2.0 Vegeta springy leg syndrome, which is just fucking great. Get a thigh swivel, it can go really far back if you push it, about close to 90 degrees going in, double joint at the knee, swivel out of the ankle, and you get the usual 2.0 Vegeta ankles. Goes that far down, looks like shit. That far up still doesn't look particularly great. In that far, looks like shit. And out that far, still looks like shit. And a hinge at the toe. So pretty much your standard 2.0 Vegeta articulation at this point, plus a side of Tamashii Nation's quality. So that's just great. So to wrap this one up, this is a very good figure if you're just getting into the line. He's only 35 bucks, so you can't go wrong with price. It's pretty much just your average 2.0 Vegeta at the end of the day, so nothing too particularly special about him. And all I really have to say about him beyond that is I still do not care for the fact that his smirk doesn't look forward. But if you can overlook that and a couple of potential QC problems, this is a perfectly adequate Vegeta figure and is well worth the $35. He's not the best Vegeta you're ever gonna hold, and he's most certainly not the best figure in the line by a long shot, but for what he's worth, he's a pretty solid release, and I would absolutely recommend picking one up if you don't already have him. But if you already have another Super Saiyan Vegeta and you're perfectly satisfied with that, then there's no real reason to pick this one up. But this has been Different Games 420, and I'll see you guys next time.